لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا Muhammad وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. In previous episodes of this series on why Islam is true, I have given evidence for the fact that the universe began to exist. In this episode, I will show why that is evidence for the existence of God. If the universe began to exist, it is evidence for the existence of a being that did not begin to exist. Reasoning from the beginning of the universe to the existence of a being that did not begin to exist, God in other words, is very similar to the argument for God's existence that I explained in the second episode of this series, in which I reasoned from the fact that the universe is contingent to the existence of a being that is not contingent, or, in other words, a necessary being. I showed that any contingent fact in the universe, the night, the day, the direction of the wind, the qualities of the seas, the stars, the planets, everything needs something else to make it true. Pointing to another contingent fact does not answer the question of what made it true, because that fact needs something else, and if it was made true by another contingent fact, then the series continues. To say that the series never ends is fallacious reasoning, because a collection of purely contingent facts is in even greater need of explanation than a single contingent fact. No contingent fact in the series really makes any other fact true, because it needs something else to make itself true. The series must end at a necessary fact that is not contingent, that does not need anything to make it true. The contingency of the universe is therefore evidence for the existence of a being that is not contingent, a necessary being, in other words. In the same way, the fact that the universe began to exist is evidence for the existence of a being that did not begin to exist. If the universe began to exist, something must have made it exist. If that being also began to exist, then the existence of that being would have to be caused by another being, and so on. To say that the series of beings that began to exist never ends is fallacious reasoning. It's fallacious reasoning because multiplying the number of things that began to exist multiplies the need for something to make them exist. Nothing that begins to exist really makes anything else exist, because it itself needs something else to make it exist. The series must end at a being that did not begin to exist. The fact that the universe began to exist is therefore evidence for the existence of a being that did not begin to exist, and that being is God. These two arguments are two detailed versions of the same general argument. The universe is dependent and needy. Therefore, there exists a being that fulfilled the dependence and neediness of the universe. In order for that being to truly fulfill the dependence and neediness of the universe, it needs to be independent and without need. The universe is dependent and needy because it is contingent, because it needs something else to make it the way that it is. The contingency of the universe is therefore evidence that it was made the way that it is by a being that is not contingent, necessary, in other words. The universe is also dependent and needy because it began to exist and needs something to make it exist. This is evidence for the existence of a being that did not begin to exist. If you think carefully about the meaning of necessity and beginninglessness, you will see that the fact that a being exists necessarily entails that it did not begin to exist. What it means for it to exist necessarily is that it doesn't need anything to make it exist. This means that it could not have begun to exist, because anything that begins to exist does need something to make it exist. Conversely, the fact that something did not begin to exist entails that it exists necessarily, because if it did not begin to exist, it doesn't need anything to make it exist, which is what we mean when we say that a being exists necessarily. The verses in the Quran that call us to reflect on the universe and its phenomena are all arguing that the universe is evidence for the existence of God. After these first 9 episodes of why Islam is true, we now understand that there are 2 reasons why this is the case. The first is that the universe is contingent. The second is that it began to exist. Through its contingency, the universe is evidence for the existence of a necessary being. Through the fact that it began to exist, it is evidence for the existence of a being that did not begin to exist. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والله سبحانه وتعالى أعلم وهو حسبنا ونعم الوكيل.